What's up, everybody, and welcome into the H&M Trucking Podcast. I am your host, Marcus. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm very excited today because we get to talk about something that's always been a bit interesting to me, but something I don't think I understand quite as well as I could, and that is fuel solutions. We're going to get Vice President of H&M, Dale Cook, and Service and Equipment Manager Jim Musel in here in a little bit, and get Denny on the line as well and see if we can parse out some of these finer details about fuel solutions and how much money can be saved when utilizing them properly. It's a good conversation, lots of really good info. Love having Dale and Jim on the show. We don't get them super often, but every time we do, they bring us a lot of really good information. So stay tuned for that one. But first, before I jumped in here, I have to play this, man, because it made me laugh so hard. As you guys know, because we've obviously done an episode about it, I'll be hanging out on the H&M Trucking Friends Facebook page from time to time. And a huge shout out to Brandon Lovely for posting this video. It's very funny. And I'm just going to go ahead and play it for you guys because I think you can relate.
So I signed up for the CDL program here at the local community college because the only thing I've been good at my entire life is holding a steering wheel and making diesel fuel disappear. But after 6 weeks of this shit, I see now I'd have been better off blindfolded riding a bicycle through a busy intersection. And I hope you got full coverage insurance on your car and you're wearing your seatbelt, because I got some folks in my class that couldn't drive a grease nail through a styrofoam block with a 10-pound sledgehammer. Matter of fact, I'm the only person in the class with English as a first language. They put all our names on the board. I thought it was to-go orders down there at the taco truck. Half the time, I don't even know what anybody is saying. I feel like I'm waiting to get my passport stamped down there in Juarez, Mexico. They ready to go riding them turbine Suburbans and them Tupperware torpedoes, oh boy. One swisher sweet away from driving a Swift truck 65 miles an hour down the sidewalk and becoming an instructional video on what not to do in an 18-wheeler. I'm gonna tell you why they charge so much for CDL school. Every truck out there is going to have a transmission by the time we're done. These some bitches trying to make it through a 10-speed Eden Fuller sounds like somebody pouring their life savings in quarters out of a 55-gallon drum on a tin roof. I hope they got a dentist that does charity work, because ain't a tooth left in one of them. Hell, you got to wear a Snell-rated helmet, a neck brace, and a 5-point safety harness just to ride in the passenger seat. I'm going to be in physical therapy, the psych ward, maybe both by the time the class is done. At least I'll be bilingual and have my commercial driver's license, though. Maybe I can get me a job driving a tortilla truck down there in Tijuana. Happy Friday, y'all. Have a good one, baby.
I gotta say, man, great stuff there. Brandon Lovely, again, thank you for posting that hilarious stuff from Alex Morrison Comedy on TikTok if you want to check him out. I know that getting your CDL these days can be a little bit of a circus, and very well illustrated there by Alex Morrison. Again, if you want to check that out, head on over to the H&M Trucking Friends Facebook page. Brandon posted that a few days back. It's down the feed just a little bit, but I thought you would enjoy it. I certainly did. All right, we've got a lot of good stuff for you, like I said, coming up here. We're going to talk to Jim and Dale right around the corner, and also stay tuned later in the program. Denny and I are going to welcome in H&M driver Leslie Tyler to come on the show and talk a little bit about fuel solutions and whatnot. So be sure to stick around because it's a great episode, and that's enough of me chatting about it. Let's get to it.
From Omaha, Nebraska, to whatever lane you're driving, this is the H&M Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Denny, did you just tell me off the air that the heat index is like 110 where you're at right now?
Yeah, it's not even summer yet.
What?
Plus my AC went out the other day.
Your AC went out. Well, you have to actually, if you pack up and move off the surface of the sun, you should be okay without AC. So it's that time of year, though, and that's what always happens. Equipment starts to fail as the heat starts to come, and same thing happens, I'm sure, on the road for you drivers out there. It starts to get hot. It's not always the most comfortable, and we've actually brought in a couple guys to talk to us about that problem, and or maybe it's not a problem for everybody, but just some of the things to look out for. I want to welcome Jim Musel and Dale Cook to the show, in here with us together. Appreciate the time, gentlemen.
Pleasure to be here, sir.
Yep, glad that you called.
Are you though? I mean, this is something we talk about every time, Jim.
Hey, you can see us on the podcast now. So
Absolutely. They're up on camera. So, gentlemen, we'll start actually with you, Jim. It was recommended to me to have you on this episode because of the technical aspect of summer. What's the load look like on the trucks as far as the difference between what summer weather and winter weather can do, not only to fuel consumption, but just to maintenance in general?
So with the heat, you're always going to have that problem where the trucks get hot. But the best thing we can always tell drivers is when you shut down for the night and you got your AP running, shut your front window curtains and then shut your back curtains for your bed. So keeps it cool. You got to keep that coldness in there. You can't just let the sun beat in.
Absolutely. So, and what about wear and tear on the engine when the heat gets like this? Is it, obviously sitting as opposed to driving, things are going to be a little bit different, but what should the drivers be looking out for when they're actually running during this kind of heat like Denny's experiencing right now?
So, I mean, you're going to have all your pollens right now with the trees and everything going to be flowing through. So you're going to make sure that you don't have nothing blocked, your vents on the outside of your truck, but always make sure that, your coolant's full, always your levels of fluids too. And anything, not working right, call the shop. And if you're getting hot and overheated, call us so we can get it lined up for somewhere to get it rinsed out or blown out, or just make sure that we don't overheat the engine.
Sure.
That's our biggest thing.
Denny, you obviously live in those conditions. Did you ever have trouble with your truck overheating when you were driving through Texas or just anywhere with this kind of heat?
Not with an H&M truck. Prior to H&M, yeah, I had an old Peterbilt, had almost 2 million miles on it. And I think I told you this before, when I'd be climbing that grade outside of Needles, California, I'd have to shut it off. I'd have to shut the AC off, open the windows, which, 120 degrees outside. It's like somebody pointing a hairdryer in your face. But that's the only way I could make it to the top without it overheating. But H&M's new equipment and maintained equipment never had a problem.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad to hear that. What's the difference in fuel consumption this time of year? Is it all the APU stuff, or does the actual temperature that the truck is when you're driving it down the road make a difference at all, Jim? I'm not smart enough to know this stuff, so if I ask a really stupid question, you can just tell me it's a really stupid question. But that's kind of where my mind goes right now. Is what's the temperature effect on fuel consumption in the heat like this, running versus stopped?
Well, I mean, you're going to be. So running down the road, your heat it still puts a load on the truck, on the motor, just because your fan's got to kick on more. It's got to cool the engine down. So it takes horsepower out of your engine when your engine fan kicks on. So it's going to take fuel. It's always going to take fuel when you got strain on the engine itself for torque. So winter is a lot different than summer. Summer's got a little more torque to it. So it's going to be a little bit harder on your fuel consumption, but your fuel changes in the summer than it does in the winter. It's dirtier in the winter, and summer it gets more hydrated, so the fuel's a little bit on the cleaner side of it. So it's you can't win either way. That's the hardest part of it.
Sure. Just a constant battle. Now, yeah. Dale, I want to ask you a couple of questions about H&M's fuel solutions. Does anything change for the seasons? You guys keep that pretty consistent throughout the year?
No, it's very consistent throughout the year. Again, the fuel solutions are driven by cost of the fuel, not the consumption. So we're going to be looking at if a driver needs, if Jim, what Jim's saying, maybe a 500-mile trip, normally would take 80 gallon. It might be taking 85 gallon because it got the warm conditions. What I've seen, though, statistically is I think the APUs keep up a little better with the air conditioning they do with keeping the truck warm.
Right.
The guys are outside where it's windy and cold in Bismarck. They're going to have more nights where we want them to run the tractor because we don't want them to freeze to death and we don't want to freeze up the fuel. So we actually get higher fuel mileage in the summertime statistically than we do in the wintertime. But we also have less idle, we have higher idle times in the winter than we do in the summer. Spring and the fall we love, right, Jim?
Oh yeah,
because then the guys, that time of year we have the best compliance and the best fuel mileage. The trucks tend to run the best when they're not freezing cold and they're not super hot. both of those conditions can cause those issues. But the solution itself, it's still calculating where's the driver going to be, how much fuel is he going to need based on the fuel mileage that we've set in the system, based on the tank capacity, and based on the pricing that we're getting from particular truck stops. So pretty simple.
Sure, absolutely. And what are you seeing as far as pricing is concerned right now? Because it hasn't been long ago that it dipped below $4 a gallon, diesel did, and Denny and I had a little mini party here on the show, and he couldn't believe that we were partying about it dropping below $4 a gallon on average. So what are you seeing out there right now, Dale?
Well, our drivers are, they're educated on this, but, even when we start in orientation, one of my presentation is part of my presentation is to go through a fuel solution and show them, we're going, I'm going to pretend like all of us are going to a ball game in Chicago, and we're sitting here with my pickup or Jim's pickup in Omaha. But we're going to check the fuel price in Omaha and Council Bluffs and in Des Moines and maybe, Altoona or someplace along the way to try and find the cheapest fuel. And if we need 5 gallons to get over to Des Moines, we're going to put that on in Omaha or Council Bluffs, whatever's cheapest. And then we're going to load up on fuel in Des Moines or in Altoona. Okay. That's how our system works. It works as simple as that. With the discounts we get, they're substantial. And we share those with the driver. We get 40, 50, 60, 70 cents a gallon off. In fact, we got our fuel report today, and maybe this will make you and Denny feel better. Our average cost of fuel last week was about $3.10.
Oh,
okay?
Wow.
So
that's great.
Based on what the pump says and what we're getting, it was roughly 68 or 69 cents cheaper. Well, that's a good thing. And if we get full compliance with our drivers, I do the math with them all the time. If we're buying 400,000 gallons of fuel a month and 3% of that isn't at the discounted price, that can be, $30,000, $40,000 a year. So 100% compliance versus 97% compliance would be perfect. But I'm not an idiot. I know that's not going to happen. We're going to have issues. You got a driver lollygagging, not paying attention, drives by a stop. We get someplace where the power's out, right? Or they're working on the exit ramp and they can't even get off and get over to the truck stop. Truck stop, has broke down in some way, shape, or form with the pumps. That's where our 3% comes from. Our drivers in general do a fantastic job of doing what they're supposed to. Some of the new drivers, we have to coax them through. They come in and they've been here a week or a month. That first month, some of them think it's a suggestion rather than a requirement. So we have to explain that to them. And they generally get on board once you take the time to explain to them they're costing us money. A good driver following his compliance is going to save us $12,000 to $15,000 a year in cost for fuel for that truck.
Wow. Take
that times 270 trucks. You get into that $3-4 million range in fuel savings. So compliance, though, they tend to be the same winter, summer, fall, and our system basically works the same. So.
Okay. Well, it's interesting to hear that, compliance was going to be something I was going to bring up here and see, what are you seeing, what kind of trends, but it seems that you guys have got it dialed to where it doesn't really vary that much. You know where it's going to be and you know how much money you're going to save because of it. So all good things. And I guess we should say hats off to the drivers for keeping that number up there because obviously, as you said, it ain't a suggestion.
Yep. It's the same with dispatch. We send them reports every month. They see how their drivers are doing. They coach them. They talk to them. They let them know, hey, great job, pat them on the back when we can. And when they're slipping a little bit, we give them a little coaching, a little scolding and say, hey, guys, you need to do better. And we pay them for that, too. I mean, that's part of our incentive pay is you stop where you're supposed to. We'll give you, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000 a year just by stopping where we tell you to. So we give some of that 10 or 12 or 15 back to them.
Sure.
They're saving us the money. You give them a little kickback. It works great.
Yeah, absolutely. Denny, from the driver's perspective, talk to me about fuel solutions. Were you one of these hyper compliant guys, or were you coloring outside the lines whenever you got the chance?
Yeah, fuel solutions weren't that hard to work within the lines. Occasionally I may want to go a different way. I might want to stop and see a relative or something. As long as the mileage was about the same, generally my dispatcher, Stacy, would look at it and go, yeah, we can do that. And she would route me that way and give me a new fuel solution. But like I say, 99% of the time, it was just fine. There were very few occasions. I recall calling Jim one time because I skipped the fuel stop thinking I could make it. And I was like 10 miles out. And I said, Jim, it says I have so many miles left on here. I think it was 5 miles left till I ran out. I said, how close is that? And he goes, I'd go ahead and stop at the TA if I were you. So yeah, that was my bad. I missed that one, but yeah, Jim knows his stuff because I wasn't stranded on the side of the road.
Then he touched on a good point, Marcus. We will allow a driver to skip a fuel stop, when we give them that 50 gallons, right? And we never do less than 50. We won't make them stop for less than 50. But if they, let's just say they're supposed to put it on in Gretna and they're headed west to, I don't know, Cheyenne or to Ogden, right? And it says get 50 gallon in Gretna and then put on the rest in Grand Island. Well, we don't care if a guy drives by the one in, if he's supposed to put on 50 in Gretna and he doesn't buy that 50 and he puts on, instead of 100, he puts on 150 at Grand Island, we just saved more money. We sort of love that when the driver can get away with it. But you can't be skipping it and then run out of fuel either, Denny, right? So that's when we say you should have stopped at the other place because that was the best pricing. Because when Denny stopped at the TA, when Jim said, well, you better stop at the TA and get fuel, we have no idea whether we got a discount or not there, right? We probably got something, but it probably wasn't as good as we'd like. So
the hardest part is the gauges. When they say empty, you can't tell if you got 10 miles to drive on it or if you got no miles to drive on it. When it says empty, it's empty.
That's what that wooden stick's for, Denny. I know that, right? Put that in the tank.
I have a question. Not so much with the fuel solution, but I always just shook my head every time the report came out and then the idle percentage, because I was always right up there at the top. And I never understood. I mean, unless I need the engine running, I get out, I shut off the engine, I get out, I lock the door. I just never understood why these guys would have such high idle rates.
Well, we laugh about this one all the time, Denny, because when we call someone and coach them a little bit, we'll say things to him. The driver will swear he's not idling as much as he is, but you ask him a few simple questions, something like, so you got a dog? And he goes, yeah. So when you stop at the rest area and walk your dog, do you leave your truck off while you're walking the dog? And they go, well, no, I'm only going to be out of the truck for 5 or 10 minutes. Well, 10 minutes, start figuring that percentage. All of a sudden, he's got 2 or 3% idle time just from walking his dog. He does the same thing when he fuels his truck. He leaves it run the whole time, runs inside and grabs a sandwich or a candy bar and a pop, leaves the truck run. He pulls into the shipper. Before when he goes to check in, he's walking to the guard shack or wherever he's going or the scale. He leaves his truck run. And what you find is those guys don't think that counts as idle time, right? Or the old thing, and Jim can talk more to this, they start their truck and let it run for 20 minutes because they want it to warm up good before they take off. Yeah. They're worried about oil pressure getting up to the top of the engine, right? Well, that's like my dad went back on the farm. When you had a 1961 460 diesel, that's what you did. You let it run and made the rattle go away before you took off. Nowadays, that rattle goes away pretty quick.
Yeah, it's not a flat top V8 anymore, right?
Yeah. So back in the day, you had to warm up the engine. You had to cool down the engines on the semis. You don't anymore.
But there are drivers that still do run with that mentality.
Yeah.
Right. So the biggest time you see wasted is like when your driver gets out, sets that brake, walks back and opens his doors to the trailer. That truck's running. Now he's popping the pin to slide his tandems. Truck's still running. Moves his tandems to the back like he's supposed to. Then he backs up. What's that, 15 minutes?
Yeah, my favorite.
Four times a
Jim knows this, and the shag drivers in town know this. They show up to start work. They go out and start their truck and then go inside and drink coffee for 30 minutes. Our shag drivers, right? And Jim's out there stealing the keys and throwing them in his pocket, right? Turn them off.
I just shut them off.
He just shuts them off. I'd steal the keys. That's what I do. Make them come look for them, okay? But they'll idle right in our parking lot. Or they come visit us up here, at 36th Street, and I go outside to leave, and somebody's here late in the day, or Wednesdays when I go golfing, right, Jim? There'll be a truck out there, and it's running. He could have his APU on if he wanted to keep it cool, but no, he just leaves it run because he's only going to stop in and turn in his paperwork, right? But he comes in, and then he runs into 3 people, and he gets a conversation going, stands there for an hour, and his truck ran the whole time. So idle time is easy, Denny, right? If you just think about those things. The analogy I use with some of our drivers in orientation is when I stop at the gas station to get a Diet Coke, right? I turn my car off when I go inside, right, and lock it up. Those guys just lock their truck up and leave it run because they got an extra set of keys, I guess. I don't know. So, but it's manageable. It just takes the guys thinking about it.
Well, if you think about it, if you're going to get out of that chair, shut it off.
Yeah.
If you're getting out of that seat, shut it off.
Well, I always said, Denny, you'll get this. I always say, when you hear this noise, go off duty and then turn the truck off, right? That's the way it should go. You hear that noise, right? Once you set them brakes, you ain't going anyplace. Shut the truck off. So.
Sure. Well, it makes me wonder, because obviously I don't have the experience behind the wheel here. So, Denny, I'll go to you here and say, is there ever a reason to turn or to leave it on, like a logical one? Like, this thing isn't a jumbo jet, right? We're not flipping 30, 40 switches and need a team of people to get it started. It's just kind of get in and fire it up. So is it anything other than just kind of not paying attention or maybe being a little bit lazy? Is there a reason to have the thing running while you're not in it?
The only reason I could come up with is you're adjusting your tandems. You're getting your load balanced right, because you have to have it running. You're having to move the tractor to move the trailer. Other than that, opening your doors, going to check in, all these other things they talked about. No, there's no reason. Shut the stupid thing off and save the fuel. The more the company can profit, the more they're going to give you. At least we would hope that's the case, right, Dale?
You bet. I mean, that's where that extra raise comes from, is us making money. So
that's why I like spring and summer. Spring and summer, I love to open my windows, shut the APU off, get some fresh air in there. Now, if somebody's parked next to me belching toxic fumes, I'm going to shut them and turn my air, so I got some filter. But you get what I mean. I think if the company can be more successful because of the little things that I do, then, hopefully they're going to give some of that back.
Yeah, amen. The one, I'll give them a little slack. We always see a little difference in idle time, Jimmy, right, between hoppers and vans, okay? Right. So in the hopper world, for those who aren't familiar out there, they've got an air vibrator on that trailer that helps them unload or vibrates the aluminum on the trailer to make the product flow out of the truck. Well, those guys need to run their truck in order to keep air pressure up to run those vibrators. So during the unloading process, they're going to have more idle time, but we still get hopper drivers who have 2, 3, 4% idle time, 5 for sure, right? No matter what time of year. And they're paying more attention to it than the guy that's got, 22 and meeting our standard. So again, there are certain things where the driver does need to do that. You might just be building air pressure on your tractor, Denny, right? You have to sit there for a minute. If the thing's been sitting cold for a while, you got to build air pressure to release the brakes. So there are some reasons, Marcus, but they're not too many, as Denny said. So.
Right. I feel like one of the things we can do on this show is hopefully propagate some positive behavior by shouting some people out. Are there any drivers that you guys might want to mention that have been really good with their idle times and are kind of setting the example? I didn't prepare you for this. I didn't have you bring these. So if you want to call out Denny, he'd love some extra attention right now. But if there's anybody else off the top of your head, let us know about it.
Denny was always pretty good. We've got some guys that they tend to be at the top of that list, just like the mileage guys. They cover more miles. I think Leslie Tyler's good on his idle time.
Yeah,
Donnie Darbone.
They're
just the ones. I don't have the list in front of me. If I did, I'd shout out to the top 20. Maybe Jim can pull up.
I can pull it up.
He's going to pull up the newsletter, because we just had that in the newsletter. Our drivers see the top 20 for idle time. We send it out to them. They're getting that recognition via the newsletter. He's looking it up. If he can find it, we'll shout out to those top 10 in both groups. But it's the same guys.
Right.
What we see is consistently it's the same guys. They tend to watch their idle time. They watch their idle time. In fact, I was going to talk about that. Sometimes these APUs break, okay? And when they break, all we ask the driver to do is get on their little Samsara tablet and type in, "I'm idling tonight because my APU is broke." Then we can react to it and get it fixed. It also documents the fact that during the course of the month, their APU was broke for, 15 days. Right. And then when we can make an evaluation at the end of that month and look at their previous month's idle time, look at the period when it was working, okay, and say, well, when it was working, you were getting 3% idle time, so we're going to go ahead and still pay you like you were under 10. If you're getting 15 and you always get 15, we'll pay you like you're under 25. We try and use some consciousness there, not just be, black and white, here's what the number says. And we get the advocate, their dispatcher, Stacy would argue for Denny. I see Terry do it all the time on a couple drivers. He goes, well, yeah, they're always down there, and they were in the cold or they were in the heat or whatever. Great, go ahead and award it to them. That phrase I love to use: let the driver win. We're talking about a few bucks sometimes, and if that helps retain them for the next 10 years, then we don't have to re-recruit them, and we're happier. So.
Absolutely.
So on the van division, you got Donnie Darbone, Lori Erickson, Randy Knoll, Roy Allen, Richard Snyder, Gene Gordon, Jack Robinson, J.J. Obert.
Same guys.
Same guys. And then you got over on the Hopper side, you got Mike Thayer, Tom Woods. You got
Tom Woods. I think we know that name.
Oh, my phone just sorry.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast a time or two, Dale.
Bill Olson, Rodney Miller, Randy Keller. We got a lot of guys that
are under 5% or 10%.
Under 10% on them.
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
They do really well. So.
Well, maybe we'll get access to that newsletter and shout them out a little bit on the podcast as well, since that work's already going in. I love to give credit where credit is due. A lot of people working really hard to make this machine move forward, and I love it when I see a driver paying attention, and we can kind of hopefully propagate a little bit of that behavior on this show. I mean, we brought in Denny, who was so good with his idle times. We're trying to set the example as best we can here, and I know he's been having a good time. I know he's been looking forward to this episode because he has some hard statistics that show that he's good at this, and so it's been really fun to watch him smile and get excited about fuel solutions, It
ain't rocket science, guys. Just, follow the plan. It helps the company. I would be reluctant sometimes, say a fuel solution was in a, kind of a sketchy area, and I didn't want to stop there, especially, in the dark hours. But those were so rare, very rare. That pilot east of St. Louis is a good example. I just didn't like that one. So I would avoid it if I could, but if that was my only option, okay, that's where we'll stop.
I'll encourage the drivers to do this. They need to call us and tell us about those, because we have the ability to go into the system and remove a particular stop. And Denny, you'll remember this one. The Love's down there by St. Joe, right? That place is an absolute zoo. They don't have enough parking, and their fuel's cheap, and everybody and their brother wants to be coming in their fuel. And we get a driver spending an hour there trying to get fuel in his tanks. Well, we don't want that either. We just pulled it out of the system for a while. They've since went ahead and built out their parking down there where it's not quite as tight, not quite as bad, and we put it back in. Haven't had any complaints from drivers since then. But if you're in, let's just say Chicago or just across into Indiana right there, those are some areas. Atlanta, we've taken a couple out. We'll pull them out if they're difficult to get into. That one down in Atlanta we pulled out, it was the biggest circle you've ever seen in your life. You come in on one end, you'd have to go through all the parked trucks to get to the pumps, and everybody's trying to pull in, and it looks like bumper cars or a Circle 8 race, right? And that when at the racetrack where they run into each other all the time. And so we want to avoid those because we don't want those claims in those areas, all the things that go on. So we'll pull them out if there's a couple, 3 guys call and say something. We yank them out, especially if it's not a big savings over the one that's right next door. So
sure. Well, it's a fuel solution. I mean, it's right there in the title, right? You guys are all working constantly to have it be a good solution for everybody and have it work. So you don't want Denny to show up at East St. Louis and get a pop knot put on his head by somebody that wants to take his wallet from him. So, I mean,
we don't care about Denny, but the rest of our drivers we worry about.
Okay. Understandable.
And Gilly needs somewhere to pee.
That's true, too. That's true, too.
It's Gilly.
He's doing good. Hey, Gil, come here. Gilly, come here.
Gilly makes multiple appearances on the podcast, Jim.
Come here, buddy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
There he is.
Hey, Gilly. How you doing, bud?
He doesn't always make it on the
enjoying
camera,
the retired
Jim,
life, too.
Yeah, sometimes we hear him in the background there, doing his dog stuff. But listen, fellas, we're up against the clock here, and I want to ask this because I haven't had a situation like this yet since Denny joined the show. But Jim, you mentioned, Denny mentioned how he called you a little bit concerned before. Do you guys have any Denny stories for me that maybe he's holding out on me for? No. He doesn't want to tell me, but, a guy like Dale, a guy like Jim might have. Anything that comes to mind off the top of your head?
Oh wow, on the spot there, huh?
Well,
I'm good.
yeah, I mean, that's just it. It might be a story that you don't want to tell on the spot. And I think just knowing that those are out there is what makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Oh, the best part is Denny and I always had good terms and ties for everything. So
Yeah, and then, I'd say the same thing. If we had 250 Denny's, our life would be a little bit easier, Marcus.
Okay.
Not willing to help, not difficult at any time that I can remember. We had lots of good conversations, right, Denny? But nothing even off color that I can remember that would get us in trouble. So, no, he's a good man. We appreciate him.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for not telling him about Chicago.
Yeah,
okay.
See, like I said, I know those stories are out there, and we'll get to them sooner or later. If I had 250 Denny's, Dale, it would be a little bit different. I think things would still run okay. I think I'd have to do some investments in some IT, get some people out there to help out for some of this crazy computer stuff we have to deal with. Denny's great at everything else on this podcast. I'm no good with the technology either. Let that be known. So we got a great team of people working around us. Obviously, Jim, Dale, you guys are a huge part of that. We really appreciate the time that you came in here to share with us today and just kind of the loose nature of the conversation. This is exactly what we hope to get out of conversations with you guys. And, hopefully some drivers learn some things about ways they can navigate fuel solutions and, what to look for as the weather turns. We really appreciate you guys sharing your time with us today.
Well, thanks.
Thanks for having us, bud.
Good seeing you, Jim.
And
you too, Dale.
Okay, Denny. All right. See you, bud.
I just hadn't seen Jim in a long time. That's why it came out that way. Wouldn't that sound ruin your day? H&M Safety Director Dean Edmonds says, you think you can stop on a dime? Well, you can't. So don't tailgate. Following too closely reduces visibility and impacts your reaction time. You all know this, but hey, a reminder doesn't hurt. Never drive under the influence and watch out for other motorists who are driving. They may be distracted or that the way they're driving might suggest that, hey, they might have had a few too many this weekend. And don't multitask when you're behind the wheel. Glancing away from the road for more than just a second can be extremely dangerous. At 55 miles per hour, a 3-second glance away from the road, you're traveling about 250 feet down the road without your attention where it really, truly needs to be. Y'all be careful out there. Everybody wants you home safely.
Well, Denny, I'm really excited about this next interview here because this gentleman has something in common with both of us. In that I believe, because I see his phone number comes up as a Texas number, that he's a Texas boy. But I know that he's out in Oregon today, which is my neck of the woods, picking up a load and heading back out east. Please welcome to the show, Leslie Tyler, H&M Driver. Leslie, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
So you are a Texas boy?
Well, not originally, no. I lived in Texas for quite a few years, but originally I am a Southern Missouri boy.
Okay. And which of those two do you prefer? And I will warn you that Denny is a Texas boy before you answer that.
That's okay. I believe that I remember Denny from when I worked here the first time. So, I like the Amarillo area about 2 months out of the year, the rest not so much. So I have to go with Southern Missouri there.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Now, Denny, the Amarillo area, you familiar? Is that close to you?
Not really, but you got to remember Texas is a big state, but I've been to Amarillo plenty times.
That old saying, Amarillo by morning, because it takes you till morning to get across the state.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Amarillo is more panhandle. I'm South Texas, just outside of San Antonio.
Oh, yeah. 10 or 11 hours from there.
Wow. That's unbelievable. I mean, it takes me 7.5 hours to drive from where I live to get to my parents. Sometimes I can make it in 7 here in Oregon, but that's driving the entire length of Oregon almost north to south and then the entire length of Oregon east to west. So right. It's crazy to me that you guys have got an 11-hour and that's not all. Like, it probably takes closer to 14, 15 hours to get from tip to tip in Texas, doesn't it?
Just to give you a perspective, if you leave Houston, Texas, driving to L.A., by the time you get out of Texas, you're way more than halfway there.
Wow.
Yep. Absolutely.
Unbelievable. That's too big of a state.
I want to say it's pretty close to 800 miles, maybe a little more across I-10.
Wow. That's crazy. Well, you know, I feel like I also owe you an apology, Leslie, because you told me over the weekend, actually a little before the weekend, you're like, hey, I'm going to be in Oregon. I'm stopping there. That's where I'm doing my 34. And I went, hey, you're going to have great weather out there. It was 70 degrees and sunny. It's been raining ever since I hung up the phone with you in my neck of the woods, which is just a couple hours south. So I'm sure that you probably had some pretty gray, dreary days up there on your 34, didn't you?
Well, what I wound up doing was staying about 4 hours from Portland and out toward the far western side of the state, and it wasn't too bad out there until yesterday evening.
Okay, well, that's good. Glad to hear it. You know, I've said this to drivers before. If there's ever a time that you're going to be stopped in the Eugene area, and you are acquainted with me, let me know, because I'd love to come out, buy you coffee, buy you lunch, hang out with you for a little bit. I know that wasn't really going to work for you and I this time around, but you make it out here to Oregon very often? Or are you one of the guys that comes out west quite a bit?
I do, actually. I'm kind of up here in the Oregon area and the Washington area probably 2 to 3 times a month.
Okay. Well,
yeah, Tucker lives out in Bend. You got to get together with him.
Yeah, Ron Tucker.
Yeah, I know Ron. I give him crap all the time.
It better not be because of that Oregon. Yeah, and it better not be because of that Oregon Duck sticker in his window, because I'm behind that too.
Oh, I don't do about that. I don't know nothing about them Oregon Ducks. I just give him crap about the military. I'm a jarhead former, and served in the Marine Corps served in the 90s, 92 to 96 active duty, post-Desert Storm in Somalia, and so he likes to give me crap in return. So,
well, Denny,
you'll see me on the company page telling him to quit eating them olive-flavored crayons.
Now, Denny, you're a serviceman as well, and Leslie, I'll take the opportunity to say thank you for your service. But Denny's also a Marine, so you guys got more in common than I even thought. The Texas thing, the Marine thing. Like, before I know it, you're going to tell me you got a dog named Gilly.
No, don't got that.
What you know, I've always wondered this. When somebody talks to me about their service time, it's always something that pops into my head because I don't have this experience at all, Leslie. But what about you changed after your military service? When you assimilated back in to being a civilian, what did you find that was different, that had really been affected about you as a person coming out of the Marines?
All right, so seriously, that's a good question. I'm going to tell you that when you're in the military, I grew up in a military family. I grew up. My granddad fought in World War II. My father fought in Vietnam War, both Army. I had a very structured life growing up anyway, so the structure wasn't nothing new to me. After living my whole life structured under a structured family and a guidance like that, and being in the Marine Corps and the military, getting out into the civilian world in the total chaos of the actual civilian world and the total chaos of society, that's probably the hardest thing to adjust to.
Denny, can you speak to that at all?
Oh, I can relate to that. When you asked the question, I was just going to say confidence. Because after I got out of boot camp in the Marine Corps, I had confidence in myself that I never had before. I mean, it just shows you can do things that you never thought you could do and surpass that.
Maybe I misunderstood the question. I mean, but that was my hardest adjustment coming out of the military. Now, going into the military, yeah, they make it mentally, physically, where you think there's no way in hell you're going to make it. But when you do achieve that, the sense of pride you have and knowing that, once a Marine, always a Marine, you will be a Marine till the day you die. That is a sense of pride that you will never get anywhere else in life.
Yep.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So on that note, you said that make you feel like you're never going to make it through it. What was the toughest part of getting through boot camp and actually getting into the Marines? Because I know they beat you guys up. I've talked to some people who've made crazy like swims out in the ocean, like miles with flight suits on and things like that. I mean, real types of things that could kill people that aren't cut out for it. So What was the hardest part? How did they twist you up, Leslie, and make you think that you were never going to get through?
Oh, just the constant physical from the time you get up to the time you go to bed every night till the time you hit the rack, reveille sounds. I mean, literally from the time you get up to the time you go down, they're physically tormenting you. But that's, in my opinion, that wasn't the hardest because your body heals. The mental, just complete reconstruction of the way you think, your brain, the tearing of you down, the constant mental stress you are under for 3 months straight, day in and day out, was probably the hardest thing for me as a new Marine and a recruit Marine.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find that translated to your truck driving career, Leslie? Because the mental stress that you guys are under every day out there on the road seems like those two things kind of marry up well together. You have been tempered in the fire here. It doesn't matter what goes on around you. You're going to be cool, calm, and collected. Is that true? Did it transfer, or is it something you kind of had to learn for the trucking industry as well?
That's something you'll carry with you the rest of your life. You'll always stop. You'll always think. You'll always assess. You always assess every situation. It doesn't matter if you're assessing your next load. It doesn't matter if you're looking at your log, assessing how much time you have. You always assess every situation and try to take the best avenue of approach. And it doesn't do any good to beat yourself up. It doesn't do any good to get all bent out of shape over things you have no control of. You've got to, as my granddad used to teach me, you got to be like water on a duck's back. You got to let that stuff just flow right off you. Otherwise, you're going to stretch yourself out to the point that you're not going to be able to drive. It's like driving in bad weather, white knuckling the steering wheel. If you're not comfortable, if you're not in that place, don't do it.
Sure. No, I've always wondered, Denny, maybe you can speak to this a little bit too, is like that you see the movies and, Full Metal Jacket and Arlie Ermy and those really crazy, boot camp captains or whatever they're called, boot camp instructors, drill sergeants, if you will. And they're always just mentally incapacitating. I feel like some of their people in Full Metal Jacket's case anyway. But it's got to feel like maybe once you've been through that for so long and you've kind of been tempered in that fire, Denny, that it's like, man, I've got a BMW that's acting like a jerk around me. He's cut me off 3 times. He keeps trying to weave in and out of traffic. Like, whatever. This will never compare to what I went through at boot camp. Is that like a thought that ever goes through your mind when you're trying to mentally keep yourself in control, Denny?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm a little bit older than Leslie. I went into boot camp about 6 months after high school. I graduated high school in 1974. And if you want to know what boot camp was like in my day, watch the first half of Full Metal Jacket. That's it. I mean, that's one of the most accurate depictions I've ever seen in any movie in my entire life. It was like going back. It really was. A lot of things have changed since then. For instance, the infiltration course where you crawl on your belly and there's mortars going off and machine gun fire. When I went through, those were real. Too many guys stood up and got their heads blown off or got blown in half by mortars that they changed that sometime after I went through. But when I went through, it was still technically the tail end of Vietnam. And these things were real. That was real live machine gun fire. If you stood up more than waist level, you're liable to get mowed down. So yeah, boot camp was intense. It was something else. And again, I'd say it gave me that confidence because it taught me something I could go through things I never thought I could. Before I went in, Dad found out I'd signed the papers. He said, son, best advice I can give you, just put your butt in neutral. They'll kick it through.
What a great way to put it. Leslie.
That is an absolute fact.
Yeah. I figured you'd have something to say about that. Now, Leslie, I'm sure you've seen the movie. How does boot camp that you went through compared to what Denny was talking about there? Did you guys have live fire as well, or had they taken care of that and gotten it out by the time you went through?
I honestly was told that it was live fire. We were one of the last platoons in 92 to go through live fire training courses of that such. Whether it actually was or not, I cannot confirm. Because I never stood up or got my head high enough to hear the whizzing of the bullets.
Good.
So, as he said, you keep your ass down, you keep your face in the mud, you put your ass in neutral, and they will kick it through.
Such a great little saying. I'd never heard that one before, and I think that could fit for a lot of things in life. You know, if you're getting your ass kicked,
just so you don't get in trouble with anybody, or I'll let you know. First of all, in the Marine Corps, they're drill instructors.
Drill instructors.
Secondly,
Absolutely,
there are soldiers and there are Marines. They're not the same thing.
Okay.
At least not in the eye of a Marine.
Not even close.
No. Soldiers are Army, Marines are Marines. Just like Texans are Texans.
Gotcha. And Air Force is airmen, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And then the Navy, those are shipmen, right?
Seamen.
No, those are squid.
Squid. See, that's the fun part about Marines that I notice about Marines is that you guys are claws out when it comes to other members of the military. Now, not that you have any disrespect towards them or anything like that.
We need them to take us where we got to go.
Right. You guys are firmly convinced that the Marines is the best branch by far, correct?
Oh, we are. There's
no doubt in anybody's mind about that. Squids are a lower form of Marine life.
Okay. All right. Why is that? What is it about the Marine Corps that makes it the top echelon? Because listen, if I'm going to be honest with you, if I'm going to talk about top tier military institutions, the first one that comes to mind is the Navy SEALs. And I know that probably offends you guys a little bit. So talk to me. Tell me why that's the case.
Navy SEALs are actually trained by Marine Corps Anglico and Marine Corps Recon. So therefore, they fall underneath Marine Corps.
An elite group. The SEALs are an exception. Just like, Green Beret or Army Rangers or Recon Rangers for the Marine Corps. They're elite groups. But as a whole, the Marine Corps is, they say, first to fight for a reason. When the shit hits the fan, they send the Marines in. Once we've taken everybody out, then the Army comes in and mops up.
Absolutely. And you got to remember, the Marine Corps is called the President's Force due to the fact that the President of the United States can send the Marines in full-blown, full force for 90 days prior to an act of Congress. So due to the training, the intensity of the training, the length of boot camp, the experience of the training in itself, it makes a normal average Marine into a fighting machine where a lot of your other services, due to MOS training, do not intensify the boot camp experience and the training experience that every Marine goes through.
Well, I've got a tremendous degree of respect for you guys being able to go through that. I think I probably embody more of a Robin Williams type in the guy that's, I can't remember which movie it is, which war movie, where he's Good Morning Vietnam. Is that the one where he's on the radio? Yeah, that's me.
Absolutely.
Just put me behind a mic and keep me insulated from all the heavy shit because I'm not cut out for it. Not cut from the same cloth that you guys are.
I got to meet that guy. Not
you guys
Robin
meet
Williams.
Robin Williams? Oh, the real guy.
Adrian Cronire, the guy that the story was actually about, the real live guy that did get on the radio in Vietnam and say Good Morning Vietnam. Yeah, I got to interview him back in my radio days. Very
cool.
Soft-spoken guy. He'd turned into a lobbyist, I think, in Washington, D.C. by those years. That was back in the 90s.
Of course. Well, we all need more lobbyists. Why not get the guy that has such a great backstory to go and argue with politicians all day? I feel for him. I really do, because that's a really cool story. What did he have to say about it, Denny? Was there anything behind that you found particularly interesting?
The radio sucked back then, just like it does now.
Well, that's a good segue. Leslie, I got a question for you now that's not going to talk about your military experience at all, because you're sitting here talking to two guys that both spent pretty long careers in radio. Denny's over twice as long as mine was, but I got a decade in there. You're a driver. You're sitting behind the windshield all the time. There is an FM radio in your rig. I know that for sure. Do you use it at all? Do you listen to regional radio at all as you drive across the country? Or are you a podcast music type guy?
I love my YouTube. I have my own bipolar playlist that plays everything from country to pop to older rap to good old hard rock and 80s rock and 90s rock. It's a little bit hours of songs on multiple playlists. And so with no interruptions, I prefer my YouTube.
Sure. I totally understand. And that's one of the things that everybody brings up, Denny. Well, radio, you only get 5 to 15 minutes of content, and then you got to go, 3, 4, 5 minutes worth of commercials. And I don't know if that part of it's ever going to change. It's always going to be one big, long, hour-long advertisement of some sort on the radio.
Yep. That's why I had my iPod when I was on the road. Of course, we had Sirius XM that H&M provides, and there are certain stations that don't have commercials, but then there are some that do. But primarily, I'd pick a playlist, and I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 songs in my iPod.
Wow.
Oh, there you go.
I'm everything from 30s and 40s jazz to blues and country, probably be my two go-tos, classic rock. I listen to a little bit of everything. So I had it all in my iPod. That's what I'd listen to.
Yeah. Well, that's, so many hours. I mean, I think my biggest Spotify playlist is 68 hours long. And I know that there's no skips on that playlist. If I really want to not be bothered and just be able to completely disconnect, it's a lot like your YouTube list there, Leslie. There's nothing I'm going to skip. Just let it play. And whatever mood that song happens to strike up in my head, that's the one I'm rolling with at this point. Kind of what you're into?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And music brings back memories. So it gives you something to think about when you're out there on them desolate highways. And I prefer to be an evening and night driver myself if I can swing it, because I get better time. I don't deal with near as much traffic. There's a lot of different reasons. But a lot less interruptions, and your mind. Music brings back memories. Music tells a story. Yep,
that's really true. And music will do that thing to you a lot, like when you smell something that you haven't smelled in a long time, but you have that memory associated with it. There's, and I apologize to my wife in advance for telling this story on a public platform, but I'm going to. Somebody walked by me a couple weeks ago with a perfume that a girl in junior high who I had a giant crush on used to wear. And I don't know what this woman's doing. I haven't spoken to her in decades. But when the person at Fred Meyer walked by me, it was like I was 13 years old again. I felt the whole thing wash over me. And that's exactly what music will do for a person. You're right, Leslie. I mean, it happens to me all the time. When you hear a song you haven't heard 10 years and you hear it, you almost get transported back to where you were when you used to listen to that song.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the early and mid 80s rock, every time something comes on, it takes me back to the skating ring days when we used to hang out at the skating ring all night long and all of us get together and just be stupid teenagers.
Yep. The good old skating rinks, man. We didn't have a skating rink where I was from, but they had a big venue hall. It was called Cloverleaf Hall. They used it for 4-H, but it was one big slick concrete floor in a warehouse. And so once a month, the Boy Scouts rented it out, and we went down and skated, played roller hockey and all sorts of stuff. And yeah, for me, it's that early 90s pop.
Right.
That's what will bring me back to the skating rink for sure. And sore knees and bruised elbows. Denny's just shaking his head at us because I mentioned 90s pop. What's wrong, Denny? You're not an NSYNC fan?
Y'all are
Backstreet
babies.
Boys?
My God, y'all are babies. When I was hitting the skating rink, which, by the way, the skating rink was a tent with a wooden floor that came around like 3 or 4 times a year. We didn't have a permanent one. It was a traveling thing. But my God, back in those days, the Beatles were still together,
Well, yeah, and you guys, they hadn't invented the inline fours as far as the skates were concerned yet.
Hell no.
You guys were still stacked side by side on those big clunky things.
I'll tell you what, I'll take those clunky side-by-side four-wheel skates over those inlines any day, though.
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
See, I was big into roller hockey when the rollerblades were out, and you can't play roller hockey on those clunky. Those things look like a Clydesdale foot. They're just they're about the least thing from streamlined I've ever seen. But why do you prefer them, Leslie? What do you like more about them?
Well, you got to remember that's what I grew up on, roller skates that fastened to my shoes, my tennis shoes, and then going to the skating ring. I learned how to support myself better in those because they weren't as ankle twisters as your inline skates were.
Yeah.
So you had to support yourself totally different on inlines than you did the side-by-sides, the old four-wheel drives. And it just, by the time the inlines came out, I was probably in my early 20s, and I had no time or use for them.
Right. Yeah, that's a hospital visit in your early to mid-20s, or even your 30s, right?
Right.
Well, this has been great. Denny, it's funny because Denny asked me on the way in here, he's like, hey, what are we talking about? Do we have something specific? And I was like, you know what? We haven't had Leslie on the show before. Kind of want to just have like a general get to know you. This has been a real good get to know you, from the military to our playlists all the way to roller skating at the Cloverleaf Hall in Enterprise, Oregon in the mid-90s. This is one of the best parts about having this podcast, to be able to talk to drivers, is we get to find out and just talk to you about things that you're never going to talk about again out there on the road. We kind of have this unique perspective here, and I really appreciate you coming on, Leslie, and just being willing to kind of go with the flow here in any way the wind blows. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. That's kind of the way you got to live life, though. You just got to go with the way the wind blows, and don't try and fight it too hard, or you're going to wind up wrecking yourself.
There you go. That's sage advice there. Well, and you know what? I was actually going to open up the floor to you here before we let you go and tell you can say anything you want to any fellow drivers, fellow H&M employees. Maybe you got some family members that are going to be listening to this episode or whatever. You kind of gave a real good piece of advice there, but I'm going to give you one more shot now that you know I'm opening the floor up to you before we let you go, Leslie. Anything else to say?
Well, I mentioned the page, the H&M page earlier, and I kind of ruffled some feathers here a while back about some drivers, complaining about certain issues. And I've seen a lot of drivers, wondering where these miles are, wondering where that miles are. And personally, my side of it, I haven't had any problem with that. I worked for H&M twice now, and both times I've averaged around 15 to 16,000 miles a month. Now, I don't know. I'm not nothing special. I plan my loads. I conserve my time. Time management is a huge issue with a lot of people. Some people can't drive at night. Some people can't drive much during the day, whatever the situation. But I want people, new drivers especially, to understand every individual makes H&M what it is for them. And that if they stay in communication with their driver manager and their dispatch, they let them know, hey, I'm going to be at this shipper or this receiver a day early or a day and a half early. And you plan your hours and you plan your trips. Your dispatcher, your load managers, your load coordinators, they will change most of your delivery appointments or pickup appointments based on what you can do and what you're able to do. So the biggest thing I can advise is stay in communication, constant communication. If you want more miles, talk to your dispatcher, talk to your load managers, talk to load coordinators. Nobody's a mind reader here. They can't just assume you're going to do this or you're going to do that. And put your best foot forward and you're going to get your best foot back. The company has always been very good to me. The first 14 months I worked here, half of that I was an owner op. I was buying my truck from the company. I did something stupid, got my ass shit canned, had to terminate my contract. That was all on me because I didn't listen to Dell. These people are here to help you. Dell Cook will bend over backwards to help you. Your load managers, your dispatchers, every one of them will bend over backwards to help you out and give you what you ask for. Follow through with what you ask for and make it what you make it. Don't listen to the other drivers. Don't fall in line with somebody with a bad attitude. Do what you got to do. Do what you need to do for yourself.
Well said there, Leslie. And Denny, I wonder if you have any response to that just because of your experience with H&M as well.
Just pretty much ditto what he just said. There's no matter where you work, in the trucking industry, in radio, whatever you do for a living, there's always what I used to call in radio the pity party. There were like 4 to 6 people every day after they got off the air. They got together and got a cup of coffee and sat around and bitched about shit. Well, you can either be part of the pity party, or you can just get on with your life and do something. But it just grows, you know. The more people that start talking about it, yeah, there's negative stuff. No matter where you are, what you're doing, there are negative things, but there's also positive things. You know, if you concentrate on the positive and try to keep a smile on your face, I know there are days that are frustrating, but you know, don't join the pity party.
Well said. Well said from both you guys. Well, Leslie, it's been great to have you on the show here, and I have to apologize for being a little off today. I'm a little under the weather, so if those of you that have listened to this whole break have been like, what the hell is wrong with Marcus? There, I just answered it for you. I'm running it like 70% right now, but you did a great job here, Leslie, for your first time on. We got to talk about some awesome things, and we actually got around to a little bit of business there at the end. I hope that everything kind of smooths out over the H&M Trucking Friends Facebook page. I know from time to time there's a little bit of bickering that goes on there, but just from a fly-on-the-wall perspective, I will say this. I feel like you guys do a lot of good on that page just in the amount of communication that you have. I see people get problems solved all the time before, you know, running it up the ladder, if you will. And I think it's a great resource. You know, we did a whole episode on it for a reason. It's a good thing for you drivers to be able to get in touch with other drivers, ask a good, hard question that maybe somebody else had trouble with, and get it taken care of. But at the same time, I think it's also important that people like yourselves, Leslie, are saying, hey, you really do have to look out for you. You can't just be concerned about everything that's going on everybody else's side of the fence. Really, the companies there will support you, and you got to look out for number one.
It's another old thing my granddad used to say to me. 99% of the problems that we meet in life, we create on ourselves. We bring them on ourselves, whether it be how we approach something, whether it be, you know, how we deal with things, whether it be how we speak to people in general. And sometimes you have to self-reflect and decide for yourself, am I bringing these problems on myself, or is it something somebody can help me fix? So I'll just leave it at that.
Great place to leave it, Leslie. It was a fantastic interview for your first time on, man. You knocked it out of the park. Really appreciate it. We're going to get you back on here soon, and we'll talk about anything else under the sun, because I feel like that was today's topic. Pick one.
Sounds good.
It was a lot of fun, man.
Fun. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Well, you be safe out there. Keep the shiny side up. All right, driver?
Always try to. Do my best to.
Semper Fi, Marine.
Semper Fi, Devil Dog. Hoorah!
Okay, drivers, rolling roadblocks we're looking at this weekend. We got some big ones, too. The BMW MOA National Rally is in Redmond, Oregon, the 13th through the 15th. 13th through the 16th, the Hog Rock River Rally is in Cave Rock, Illinois. Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival in Manchester, Tennessee is going to be jamming things up on I-24 the 13th through the 16th. And NASCAR is in Newton, Iowa. I'd avoid that, loves, if I could. The NASCAR Iowa Corn 350 on the 16th. Y'all be careful out there. I'll catch you on the flip-flop.
That's going to put a bow on this one and wrap it up real nice to go under the Christmas tree in June, which is a real weird time to have a Christmas tree. But hey, you do you. Thank you all so much for being here today. Really appreciate H&M driver Leslie Tyler for that fantastic conversation at the end there. And I want to say thanks to Jim Musel and Dale Cook for coming on to talk about fuel consumption and fuel solutions. And of course, my illustrious co-host Denny, thank you to him for all of those awesome updates that you get. You know, it takes a village to run this podcast, and we got a pretty good one. We're happy to be here, happy to have you. Don't forget to click subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen to. It's absolutely free. All it's going to do is inform you when we drop an episode, which is, you know by now, 62 episodes in. That's going to be every Wednesday at 5 a.m. Central Time. What else do we have? Oh yeah, don't forget, we've still got a free gift for you guys. And I know some of you are stopping by the terminal, but I need you to go ahead and give the shout out and actually say what we need you to say. or else Sherry and Eve are going to send you packing like a big league umpire. I've already told you this. You need to go up to Sherry or Eve and say, "Stay fresh cheese bags." You can't just call them a cheese bag. You can't tell them what your favorite type of cheese is. You can't call them any other kind of bag that might help something stay fresh, like a Ziploc bag. It's got to be these 3 words: Stay fresh cheese bags. It's pretty simple, and it's an awesome gift. I can't tell you what it is yet, but I'm sure you've heard it through the grapevine at this point. It's our way of saying thank you. So make sure to go and say "Stay fresh cheese bags" to Ari or Sheeve, to Sherry or Eve the next time you get in there, and they will hook you up. That's all I've got for you today. So on that note, stay fresh cheese bags. It's the 3 words. It's the ones you're supposed to say.
Thank you for listening to the H&M Trucking Podcast. Please leave a review, subscribe, and connect with Marcus over at the H&M Trucking social media channels. And if you're considering a job at H&M, find us at hmtrucking.com. Until next time, stay safe and ahead of the curve drivers.